Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Questionable Album Club. We haven't done one of these for ages. We're a spring break. Um, on the panel today, we've got Steve Gibson. Hello, Steve.
Hello.
We've got Steve Hackett. Hello, Steve.
Hello there.
Two Steve. We've got Steenie. Hello, Steenie.
Hello.
And Ross English.
Good evening, everybody.
And it was Ross's choice for this week's episode, and it is the 1967 notorious psychedelic album from the Rolling Stones, their sixth studio album. And it's famous for being, well, I suppose Sergeant Pepper's came out in June '67. This came out in December 1967. Features many of the same sort of themes, has the same cover photographer, sort of old-fashioned cabaret English music hall vibe going on. That kind of English psychedelic thing. It's perceived as a kind of cash-in, psychedelic cash-in thing, not being true to themselves. Unbelievably, this was the one before Beggars Banquet at the beginning of their Imperial phase, which was the very next year. And yeah, it's a very, very unique artifact in the Rolling Stones canon. It's not like anything else they've ever done. I've never listened to it all the way through. I've been aware of it. I'm aware of everything around it on either side, but I've never gone in. I've always been put off by the cover, and it's one of those just weird records. And I think this was a fantastic choice. Ross, it was your call. Do you want to explain yourself and your?
Yeah, I mean there are two reasons, and the first is essentially what you said is that it came out, it got a very sniffy critical response at the time and was quickly forgotten, mainly because Beggar Banquet came out at the same shortly after. But the reason I think it's questionable is that what's happened over the last sort of 60 years is that in some quarters that reputation has stuck and remained. I mean, not least with Keith Richards, who as you say, just sort of dismissed it as a Sergeant Pepper put on in his autobiography. But there's been other quarters where people have said that, this deserves a reevaluation. It's a misunderstood gem. It was unfairly maligned. And so there's a lot of disagreement that goes on today. And that, I think, made it questionable. But the other reason is because its very existence has always fascinated me. And this isn't a comment on what's in the album. But I just think that this period between 65 and 69 is probably the most exciting period in popular music, in rock music, pop rock music, bar none. Things are moving so fast that, what's coming out in 67 is nothing like what's in 65. It's nothing like what's in 69. And there are periods of music history where there is great innovation going on, but it tends to be within a genre or maybe two genres who are really pushing things forward. Whereas here it's everywhere. It's in folk, it's in pop, it's in rock, it's in jazz, it's in soul. It's you look everywhere, and it's all feeding off each other. And then there's the Rolling Stones, this isn't. I've got to choose my words carefully. I'm not saying that they were bad in this period. They clearly weren't. They're bringing out some very good music, and I'm not saying they weren't completely uninnovative, because collectively and individually they had their moments, but they seem to me to be quite a conservative band within all this, who are sort of, they're doing what they do very well with nods to the popular culture. Here's a sitar, but you're not, compared to where the Beatles or Brian Wilson or wherever it is, you're never saying where the Stones are going, others are following, and they seem to be ploughing their own. They're plodding along despite their reputation as rebellious. And then in 67, they decide, you know what, we're going to throw our hat completely in a ring with this, with this psychedelic sound. And it seems a very unstonesy thing to do. So I find that, very fascinating in itself. So yeah, those are the two reasons. And I'm intrigued to know what people thought.
Yeah, okay. I think actually, the album before this, Ross, Between the Buttons, that's quite psychedelic. It's not so overtly, this is psychedelic. It has similar trappings to but I would. You know what I mean? I don't think it's unique in that sense.
Yeah.
But very good, very well explained. Steve Hackett.
Rolling Stones.
Do you remember this when it came out?
Yeah, well, look, Rolling Stones, like you said, the Imperial phase, the three albums that came after that. I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree that they're great albums, but it's not a great strike rate, is it? I don't know how long they've been going now, 60 years or something, but, three good albums as far as I'm concerned, and a couple of half decent ones. I think this is one of the half decent ones. I'll be honest with you. I think it's pretty good. I do think it gets it gets a bit of an unfair press. I'm the same as you, Seb. I just knew about half of it. The other stuff I hadn't bothered with. So it's been really, really interesting listening to that stuff. I do think I've just finished this at the weekend. Not a plug. This amazing book. It only took me 2 years to read it. And a massive, big, thick, weighty tome of all things psychedelic. I really recommend it. And I thought,
who's it by, Steve? Who's it by? I can see the cover. Who's it by?
It's by a guy called Rob Chapman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's utterly brilliant, and anyway, whatever. That's. I thought, I wonder what that says about it, and it says absolutely nothing about it. Absolutely nothing. The album doesn't get a mention at all, which is a little bit odd, really. And I think there's a little bit of snobbery attached to it, because this book and a lot of the critics, they'll go on about a lot of the, the singles and the stuff that came out at the time. And if this was an album by, the Seeds or something, or Shadows of Night or whatever, I think it would probably be regarded as a sort of a lost sight classic. But it's the Stones, and it's always going to be regarded as that album that is not quite what the Rolling Stones do. I mean, I like it. I think it's a pretty good album. It's been really interesting listening to the other stuff, which I've not really heard, I'll be honest with you. But,
Steve, you've bucked the current trend we have on the Question Album Club of revealing your opinion on the first time round.
Sorry. Yeah.
These days, everyone just goes, I don't know. I'm not going to say what I think. And
yeah.
But I like the fact you've just come out and said you think.
I'm not a massive Stones fan overall, I have to say. I think they're an overrated band. They always come across a bit knobbish to me. But, the 3 albums that came after this, fantastic. And that's what they are. They're a blues rock band. They do that well. Do they do this well?
They certainly pivoted into the blues. They funneled down into one particular thing, didn't they? And
it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a sort of trajectory there with the Rolling Stones. And if this album never existed, you wouldn't, it's sort of a natural sort of trajectory, isn't it?
I think you can see, but I think we'll come to this anyway. I don't want to kind of start having a random conversation, but I think you can see that on songs like The Lantern, you can see the Lantern, it sort of signals where they're going. Perhaps it could be like an outtake off Axel or something. Anyway, we'll have a Stones conversation generally as we go forward. We'll just go around with people's Steenie.
Yeah, well, I'm a bit of a Stones fan, and I'm familiar with this record. So I did own it, and I have already listened to it in the past. But everyone's been saying it's always been the sort of black sheep of the family. I mean, black sheep of the golden period, I suppose, from their first album to when they start to get exceptionally patchy, and then obviously less said about Dirty Work and Undercover of the Night and all that. But yeah, it's one of those records that the fact that the Stones themselves are so dismissive of it makes it really interesting to me, because it suggests that they weren't 100% behind it, or certainly Mick and Keith, and the fact that there's only 2 songs that anyone knows off this record really, which are She's a Rainbow and 2000 Light Years from Home, and I guess that's because they were the A and B side of a single together and ended up on lots of compilations. And then She's a Rainbow sort of gone from strength to strength. So this album has a life that's gone well into the 21st century. I mean, I think, who was it, Apple or someone were using She's a Rainbow to advertise products? Was it Apple or Microsoft, or someone picked it up and it was on tons of ads? So these songs do have had a life beyond this sort of weird, slightly shameful birth that they had. And even at the time, I think the Stones weren't really entirely on board with it. But what's interesting to me is that it's one of the more collaborative Stones albums in a way, or superficially collaborative, because Bill Wyman gets a credit on it, which he never gets credit. He's not even allowed to play bass normally. Normally, Keith
not only does he get a credit, he sings, doesn't he?
He sings the lead vocal on, without preempting too much, one of my favourite songs on the album, which because it's such and it's such an unusual thing.
But Steenie, when they not only is it unusual, but they released that as a single. That was the first single off the album, and it was credited as a Bill Wyman single.
I've seen this. I've seen the sleeve for it, yeah, and it's Bill Wyman's. Yeah, it's entirely him. It's almost like, well, he did this, and then I mean, if it had gone on to be an international mega smash, I'm sure that Jagger and Richards would have found a way to tack their names onto it somehow. But as it was, it sort of didn't really go anywhere, and it sat on this kind of the run to the litter kind of album, or certainly by reputation, the run to the litter. But I think it's a key. It is a key album. It's what Steve was saying about the trajectory, and the thing that intrigues me the most, as well as the fact that the Stones don't like it, is what might have happened if this had really caught on and people had gone, do you know what? Sod Sergeant Pepper, this is a brilliant record, and somehow public taste had sort of twisted everyone's mind, and they'd had a success. Would they have then gone into that Beggars Banquet era and just sort of sod it? We're to hell with all of this psychedelic stuff. We're going straight ahead blues. We're getting the harmonicas back out, and it's all 12 bar from here on in. Would they have, or, might they have kept ploughing this furrow if public opinion and critical opinion had sort of got behind it?
I think was it also to this was Brian Jones's last significant contribution as a Vice set edition, because this was the last big flowering of Brian Jones, really. Because
I think he contributes a lot.
Very much was driving it.
I mean, the very last thing that he did of any note ever is probably that slide guitar on No Expectations, isn't it, on Beggars Banquet? That's like the best, the last really great thing that he ever did.
And also, I think perhaps musically, most consequentially, it was between this record and Beggars Banquet that Keith discovered open G tuning, which of course defined the majority of their sound moving forward. I think that was a significant thing as well. So, but I think, right about the critical reception. Thank you, Steenie. We'll delve deeper in a minute. Steve, I'm very
laughing.
Steve, you're officially, the reason I'm saving you to last is you're kind of the Darth Vader of the pod. So I'm sort of, do you know what I mean? I'm sort of saving you. Kind of like, come on, let's have it. Mate.
Well, first of the Stones, I've tried. There's some songs that I think "Gimme Shelter's" pretty sublime, but they just bore me senseless. I don't get it. I don't get Keith. And there's people sitting on this podcast right now who I can show YouTube clip after YouTube clip of him being plainly just awful. And I want some people I know to say, well, no, actually, I want it to explain to me really, because I think I refer to this book now and again, I know, but Bruford's book, he uses the Stones as a kind of, because they become a joke really. It's, what is it? It's a lifetime down the road, isn't it? And they should just shuffle off and that's what it sort of signals the death of popular music in a way, because you look at that Glastonbury performance, everybody packs it out to hear them playing songs badly from years and years ago instead of new popular music. This album I'd never heard it. What I did, and channeling into what Ross said, actually, rather than actually, because I did try and sort of do a bit of Stones research, but you just get the same old flannel from all of them, was actually look at the rest of the albums that came out that year. And the weather has been fantastic in this country for the last couple of weeks. We've had a lot of time. So I've been spending some evenings with headphones on the roof terrace here, drinking, listening to albums, and then dumping this one in the middle of it all, and I'll probably leave it there, actually. The thought of me drinking on a roof terrace. But, I say roof terrace. When I came round, it was a bit of wasteland.
Hey, that's your most brilliantly baffling setup ever. You fucking hate the Stones. They're just utter fucking self-parody. But you spent the last couple of weeks in the beautiful weather listening to other 1967 albums or drinking.
Yeah, and then put this in the middle of it to try to give it a chance, to give it,
wow.
See what happened when I put it on, and when we go around again, I'll fill in.
No, I love it. I'm loving your work, mate, as always. Loving it. I've said what my relation. I'm a big Stones fan, but and I know Aftermath and Between the Buttons before this, and to me, the Imperial period goes from Beggars Banquet through to Goat's Head Soup. I think Goat's Head Soup is probably my favourite Stones album, especially the expanded, reissued one from a couple of years ago. I just think it's amazing. And then a very steep downhill after that. But yeah, I didn't know this. I know 2000 Man, I'm afraid, because Kiss covered it on Dynasty with Ace Frehley singing it. so I can't really enjoy that song. I want to enjoy it. I like this version. It's much better. It's got all different rhythms as it goes through. It's much more interesting and layered. But I can't really enjoy that song because of my history with that through Kiss. So it's kind of spoiled. But I thought this was. Well, I'm going to offer an opinion. If I don't care. I thought it was magnificent. I thought the Citadel was incredible. I thought this was the Stones before they decided to be a low slung rock and roll band. Before they decided to before they became the cool entity, the kind of cool. And people, cool is a subjective thing, and I totally understand Steve thinking they're a bunch of past it twats. They're so try hard. They were this. Keith's a shit guitar player, but I completely agree with all that. But rock and roll was about myth, right? And they were the greatest myth makers of all. And I think what I love about this is it's so they made it over a whole period of time. Andrew Loog Oldham, their producer, had done everything before this. They fired him. They were in the studio for a year. They had the drugs trials. They had all this shit going on, and Brian falling apart, and lots of drugs, all that sort of stuff, loads of legal issues. And they were in the studio for ages doing all this, and it didn't. And to me, it's just their last bit of playful before the Stones brand took over. This is this beautiful, colourful. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try some horns here, some this, some percussion, some this, some backwards mellotron. But it still sounds like them. It's like the last joyful thing of them. And I've just had this is the best fun I've had with the record since we've been doing this. I even bought it on CD as a result of this. And I'm a big Stones fan anyway, but for some reason I've been because the cover is to me the cover is just so awful. It's just all the terrible cliches of that era. They're all their pointy hats and the wizard stuff, and Brian Jones looking like a fucking mushroom. God, it's just awful. It's embarrassing. So
it almost ruins the record, doesn't it?
It almost does. It's so bad and so cliched, and it places it so formulaically in a particular time. And what I've heard, but I'd never actually listened to the whole record. And I just thought it was. I even like the silly longueurs, the sort of. But I like Amandul One records, so all the kind of big long jams and stuff. I just thought it all they work. I just thought the whole thing was just charming. And it's not a great album. There's lots of stuff missing. It's unfocused, but I just thought it was lovely. And just again, I thought the stereo. It's much better in mono. The stereo. It's one of these early stereo records where it's just that whoever did the stereo, it's a joke, absolute joke. But mono, it just hits you front on, and I absolutely loved it. But then I'm likely to love it because I'm a big Stones fan. So this was me finding something amazing. So thank you, Ross. Ross, what did you think?
So I'm still stuck with this idea Steenie put in my head that if this had been a massive success, we probably had Just For You and Rockstar coming out, 20 years earlier or something. I think someone said this before. I like the Stones, but I don't love them. The sort of late 60s, early period, sort of period between about 66 and 71, 72 is my happy place. And it's where I spend most of my listening, probably. And the Stones I've always liked the songs, but I've never really fell in love with them. I own albums from that period that comes after this, and I've seen them play live a couple of times. The first time I did the thing which I always do, which is I not check the date of the ticket when I say, yeah, I'll come to the thing. So I stood in Wembley Stadium watching the Rolling Stones play while England were playing West Germany in the World Cup semi-final in Italia 90.
Famous, yeah. I know loads of people who went to that, and yeah.
We had radio, so we knew what the score was, and people were holding signs up in the boxes with penalties. And apparently, they were going to show the winning goal if England won on the screen. And I had no idea whether this was planned or it was just happenstance. But when the news came through that England got out, they went into "you can't always get what you want." And I don't know. Anyway, I was thinking about that gig because I remember they played. I remember they played 2,000 Light Years from Home on it. And so I found a recording of those shows. So I wondered, were they trying to do it in a psychedelic way? And they were. But then as I listened to that recording more, they were trying to do a facsimile of every song. It was like, you heard it on the album? Here you're going to go. Anyway, sorry, I'm digressing massively. I think it's all right. I think what's wrong with this album is I think they're trying too hard and they're missing the point. It's like someone trying to ape something they don't quite understand. And I think you mentioned the cover. That's emblematic of it. They're trying to do Sergeant Pepper, but Sergeant Pepper had a sense of its own ridiculousness about it. And they're sitting in wizard hats looking miserable. Wizard hats. And then, and what's that got to do with Satan? And then what's Satan got to do with songs about rainbows and feathers and flowers? They're just, anyway, that's not the music, but that you're right, that's annoying. I think that they're just trying to do I like Steve. I've spent an awful lot of time. I mean, because we've had so long between these. I spent the first couple of weeks listening to loads of Stones, and I spent the last 2.5 weeks just listening to late '60s psychedelia, which has been brilliant. And I think when the psychedelia works in that period, it's when it doesn't try too hard. It's when the psychedelia is embedded in the song and it's not just about whirry sounds and lyrics about fairies and rainbows and and whatnot. I mean, particularly someone like Jefferson Airplane, who I think they get the mix right. I've been on a real sort of Moby Grape and Spooky Tooth vibe this week. And in fact, there's this compilation called Nuggets. I don't know if you know, which was like from psychedelic songs from the late '60s. You actually listen to that, and some of those songs in isolation, you think, really, is that psychedelic? And it's actually because it's not being forced on it. So things like Gompa, which I think is the worst song on the album. It's just all like, we've got to try and be psychedelic. And also, I don't like the Bill Wyman one because it's trying too hard. I think where the album works is where it's not. And I think The Lantern, which sounds like they were trying to write something that could either be on Highway 61 or Blonde on Blonde, I think that's very Dylan-esque in there. I think that works well. And I think some of the stuff in the middle, in sort of like that mid-period of the album works well when they're not just laying it on. I think the problem is the words produced by the Rolling Stones. And the history of rock is just full of albums where the band have to realize that producers have a job, and that job is sometimes necessary. And the fact, I think, with a better hand on this, I think there could have been something here. I just think the handbrake comes off a bit too much in it. I think it's all right. I just think it just lets itself go in places.
Yeah, I think that's what I like about it, the lack of a handbrake, that they produced themselves over a year of chaos, and this is what came out of it, this unfocused gibberish. And I think it's charming and lovely because it was Jimmy Miller after this, wasn't it? Jimmy Miller was very much ducks in a row. Who's next? Steenie.
I shall unmute. I found it similarly a charming and enjoyable experience. It's one of those records where they are trying too hard, but what's interesting is that there's very little actual Beatles aping going on. Everyone's like, they're trying to do Sgt. Pepper, but actually, in terms of sonically, there's not a lot where you'd say there's any direct Beatle influence on there. I think if anything, some of the songs sound a bit more like the Kinks or the Small Faces, but there's no like obvious points where I'm going, oh yeah, that sounds very, very Beatle-esque.
Isn't it the sort of the Cod Music Hall On With The Show is probably the obvious one?
They even managed to, but that's still got a sense of like the Stones kind of sordidness, because it's a bit kind of leery and it's about blokes going to a club without their wives knowing, and it's a strip club and they get too drunk, they get loaded into a car, and there's something that's not particularly Beatley about that. But yeah, the musical aspect of that, I suppose, and I find that song actually one of the more annoying ones on the record. Although I quite like the effect on his voice to start with, and then it gets a bit grating, and then do away with it for a second, and then it's back on again. But yeah, and I definitely get what Ross said about the sort of stylistic attempts to introduce things like whirry sounds, like every effect imaginable going, to doll up songs that might not necessarily be in themselves particularly psychedelic. But then when they do get it right on this record, they absolutely hit the nail on the head. I mean, the two famous ones which we've mentioned, She's a Rainbow and 2000 Lighters from Home, they are like proper bangers. I mean, She's a Rainbow is like, it's glowing, isn't it? It's like luminescent. When you listen to it, it sounds like colors. It's so much about that song that's really brilliant. Even though I've heard it a zillion times on adverts, and I still can disassociate from all of that and just enjoy it for what it is, because it has this sort of rush, this great sort of colourful wash feeling to it. And I love the piano work on it, Nicky Hopkins there, and I love all of that.
It's a super compressed piano, isn't it?
It is. It sounds like harpsichordish, but it's all sort of celeste or something. I can't quite put my finger on what makes that sound. It is just very compressed and treated. But I really like that. I like the bits where it breaks down and where that string arrangement, which is John Paul Jones, um, sort of cuts into the noise and there's loads of bow scratching and weirdness and it sounds like it's fallen to bits. Then it comes back in again, and it does never detracts. All of the little effects they put in that actually add to the entire vibe of the song. And then 2000 Light Years from Home has got such a like good feel as a song, in terms of it genuinely feels lonely and spacey. There's something about it that's sort of kind of empty-ish and that used to get me as a kid anyway, but I still feel it when I listen to it now. And I really like the sort of loping rhythm guitar on that Keith does. But then the less well-known tracks, I like Bill's little thing. There's something quite fun. That's the one that really reminded me a little bit of the Small Faces, and apparently it's got Marriott and Lane singing on it on backing vocals.
Wow.
Looking according to the source of all knowledge, Wikipedia. But it has got that sort of Ogden's feel to it about a man who has a strange dream, and I quite like it. And I think that Bill Wyman should probably have done a bit more. He shouldn't have been such a lazy ass. But it's obviously not easy being in a band with two like immense blowhards like Jagger and Richards. And probably all the ideas he did contribute, they just stuck their name on it anyway, the same that they did with Mick Taylor later on. But I do really enjoy that song. I like the idea of it, and the sort of some of the lyrics are a bit childish, but he didn't get a lot of practice writing lyrics, Wyman, to be fair to him. Citadel, absolutely brilliant. I really love that. So I love the guitar sound on that song. That sort of very loud guitar that keeps coming in is absolutely magic. And what else tracks have we got?
Sing this together.
Yeah, that sort of falls short in the same way that I'd never liked whenever the Stones try and do a kind of sing along chorus like Salt of the Earth. I've never liked that song.
I love Salt of the Earth.
No, I don't like it. There's something weird about that song. I've never kind of got on with it.
Is that the one where Keith sings the first verse?
Yeah, I've never got on with it because I don't like it sounds to me like loads of people who've never ever done a day's work in their life are saying, "Oh, let's drink to the soul of the hard-working people." It's like, what would you know about hard work, you work-shy fops? There's one of the what's the other song that I really love on this? There's we talked. It keeps coming up.
Lantern.
The Lantern.
Lantern, yes, which is a blues rock song disguised as a psychedelic tune. And what you were saying about the mono and stereo mixes on that is especially true because there's the really nice washy guitar that keeps coming in. That's just like one 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 one, and when you listen to it in the mono, it's just sort of nicely mixed and bedded in it. If you're in the stereo, it's right in your right ear, and it's just going, rah, 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 and then it stops really abruptly every time, and you're like, "What? Where's that gone?"
Yeah, totally, 100%.
And it's very distracting sort of stereo mix, and you're right that the mono is good, but it's one of those records where, like, I sort of wanted to pick holes in it because, it made me sort of, I wanted to be wrong when I went to it. I wanted to go into it and listen to it and have my prejudices proved correct, and actually they were proved wrong, because it means that I've been missing out on listening to it as much as I should have. Because there are songs on there that are worth revisiting. Maybe 5 or 6. There's that really do deserve a bit more praise, and they're probably tarred with this sort of brush. I mean, Gomper obviously isn't going anywhere. I don't really particularly like that. Some of the rhythmic jams though and stuff, that's something that's kind of unique to the Stones really, because they did have that Brian Jones obsession with the master musicians of Jujuba or whatever it was. He went to North Africa, didn't he? And he was really into all that. And so there's something that's actually not quite so cod as you might think about all of the use of the African rhythms, in the same way that like George's obsession with the sort of Indian thing. And unlike George's thing where he basically just hired, every time he needed Indian musicians, he'd hire them in because no one can play that music except the people who are born to do it. The Stones, they were game. They're having a bash. They're just smacking away on instruments out of time with each other. But it's fun, and there's bits in it that do work. But it should
Yeah,
all be condensed.
I think this is a lot more kind of like psychedelic musically than Sergeant Pepper's for sure.
I think Sergeant, but there's a lot more intelligent songwriting in Sergeant Pepper's. They're not that. It's not
Yeah,
just
that's not.
throwing. It's not just throwing crap at a wall and seeing what sticks. And there's something a bit more free and fun about doing the latter approach, and just than sort of sitting down and knowing your major sevenths from your minor sevenths and what and various cadences, what effects they'll have, and all the sort of McCartney thoughts.
Yes, I was going to say
Um,
they sound like Paul McCartney thoughts to me. Yeah,
they are McCartney thoughts, and they're not very psychedelic.
yeah,
So
right, indeed.
yeah, but yeah, I think it's a really nice album. It does retain some of the bluesy Stones touches. You can see glimpses into the future, but like I said before, it'd be interesting to see what would have happened if people had really loved it and they've become this great psychedelic band.
Well,
So they all-
Steenie, that leads us. That's quite a nice little segue there. So what would happen if people really loved it? Well, let's picture the scene. You're in Salisbury, quite grumpy. You've been drinking all day. You're sitting on your roof terrace. You've got headphones on. You've been listening to 1967 albums the whole time. The sun's shining. You're in a lovely mood. Steve Gibson, what happens next?
Well, thanks, Ross, really, because it was very interesting to hear some albums again. There's obviously some very, very well-known albums that we all know and maybe love or hate that year. There was I can't talk about the Stones without mentioning Charlie Watts, who I love. Over the last 3 or 4 years, his anthologies come up in my Spotify end of year thing. I love his playing, but not in the Stones. And as I understand, he pretty much agreed with me on that because Miles Smiles came out on this year, and he must have been thinking, what am I doing this shit for when that came out? I'd never sat down and listened to Sergeant Pepper's before ever, but it fucking turns out I have. Um, and this album really doesn't. It's the only one that I listened to that I thought, oh, they're just trying to do something that they're not really very good at. And I've got an underlying hatred of rock bands using Indian stuff because the year before this, John Mayer's Indo Jazz Fusions came out, which is fantastic, and it actually looked at the scales and actually marries the music up properly and does it in a thoughtful way. And the whole album is just completely sublime. And that's the way you do it. Rock bands, whether it be the Beatles, the Stones, whatever, they just play their rock music and dump a load of sitar on it. And I think the piano's awful on this album. The voicings are terrible. That said, I had very low expectations because I'm not a Stones fan. And I didn't like the big sort of long workout, the sort of, where they're throwing mud at the wall, throwing shit at the wall. They just weren't interesting enough for me. There was just nothing. There's just nothing there. There's a couple of good tracks. I like the 2000 Man thing, and there's sort of glimpses of reasons why I like the odd Stone single and stuff like that. So it wasn't like an awful listen, but I thought compared to literally everything else I listened to, it just doesn't stand up, and it doesn't stand up today for a say. It just sounds a bit twee and a bit like, flower. Listen to what the flower people say in parts. You could use it as a parody for that. So I will not be listening to it again. I'll file it away. The Stones. I mean, fuck's sake, you can't really. It's such a, didn't. In fact, Steve, weren't you offered a ticket in the 80s for a farewell tour then that you didn't go to?
Me?
Was that you or Sean?
It wasn't me, no.
Was Sean then was funny. Yeah, it was. This is.
Yeah.
They're ridiculous, and this album. I try to isolate it, and once again, I mean, I've tried it with you fucking get your sticky yah-yahs out, but they just bore me. There's nothing. They're not interesting enough. They don't do. In fact, because I listened to the one before it. Is that with Ruby Tuesday on it and stuff like that?
Yeah.
There's some quite good, there's some good pop songs on there, I guess. But this, and I agree with you, Steen. I didn't hear any Beatles at all till the last song. I didn't get any. I didn't get the challenging the Sergeant Pepper's thing at all. Especially not listening to them virtually side by side. I didn't hear that at all. And I would say, yeah, there was more like kinksy stuff going on. But I'm not even sure they really. This is their idea. This is their idea of a sort of interesting psychedelic album, and to my ears, they never do an interesting anything. So why would I expect this to be anything more than a fairly boring, tedious listen with not much creative energy there at all, I'm afraid. So, but that said, I didn't hate it. It wasn't the worst thing I've heard on this. So yeah, that's pretty much where I was. But it was lovely weather, and I enjoyed the drinking. So.
Most importantly,
Yeah.
I think Charlie's amazing on this. I think Charlie's is fantastic throughout this because he's not locked into the kind of blues thing. He's completely free to just do what he wants. What do you think of Charlie's playing on this, Steve?
I don't like it.
Don't like it.
I don't like it. I don't like him with the Stones anyway. And he doesn't like it. He doesn't like playing with. He didn't. He wasn't fussed about his playing with the Stones. So, and actually look up the cover of the anthology, and you'll see him playing with the biggest, cheesiest grin on his face because he's playing with a big band or whatever.
Is this his big band thing, right?
Well, big band, jazz, small, it's quartets, whatever. It's like a big anthology of all this jazz stuff. Which, he's the first to say he's not the greatest jazz drummer, but he just plays it with such a smile on his face, and he has got such swing. But I never hear that in the Stones. So, yeah, that's where I am.
Right, should we go on to any other things to say, Ross?
Stephen said it, yeah.
Well, I think, Steenie summed it up perfectly, really. There's not much more to say about the music than that. It's, I agree. I'll ask a question to the musicians here on a different type. Is Keith Richards a good guitarist?
No.
Or is he massively overrated? Because
yeah,
I don't get it.
He is a good guitar player. He's a good Keith Richards guitar player.
He's not a lead player. It's like people say it's Malcolm Young, a good guitar player. Malcolm Young is an incredible guitar player, but he doesn't play solos. I mean, Keith Richards is a brilliantly innovative guitar player. He did with his open tuning. In his autobiography, he writes really, really well. There's a lot of bullshit and nonsense in his autobiography, but he writes about music and about his approach to open tuning really, really well. And he was very messy and sloppy, but he was a great rhythm guitar player. What was brilliant about him and Ronnie particularly is the way they wrote parts. They just weaved everything together. It's never if you listen to the Start Me Up, because we've had to do Start Me Up and the two guitar parts. If you separate Keith's part and Ronnie's part, they're just doing so interesting things. The two parts together, and if you break down in all Stones songs, I don't know all the shit stuff like Dirty Work and Undercover, all that sort of stuff. Absolutely, God knows what they're doing in there. But they're such interesting parts. The weaving guitar parts, they're always doing interesting things. They're never just playing the chords. They're always one's doing one thing, one's doing another. So, insofar as like widdly, no, of course not.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more to playing the guitar than that.
But also,
his albums are some of the other albums, aren't they? It's not this one. I mean, you always think of this one. I mean, I'm glad this album exists because there's no other album that Brian Jones got sort of as much freedom as he did on this. Really, not that I know of, anyway. And I just think it's fantastic from that point of view. Tell you what's good to hear about it. So it's a lot of that like 60s psych stuff, brilliant though it is, and arguably much more genuine than this that it is. It sounds awful, doesn't it? Most of it, it's badly recorded and cheaply done. There are a lot of obvious tropes on it, all the phasing and all this sort of thing. Obviously, the Stones were quite, wealthy and famous by the time this album came around, so they were allowed, a lot of indulgence.
I think that all the songs sound different. Some of the songs do sound a bit like that, but I think they've all got their own little different sonic sound world. Like 2000 Light Years from Home to me it sounds like a sort of psychedelic 34 elevator song.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about this album. I'm talking about just the stuff that most of that pop psych that came out of this country at the same sort of time. Didn't have the money behind it. Now I love this album. I actually love it. I really do. It's gone right up in my estimation. I think it's fantastic.
I realised that I didn't give anyone else a chance to say whether they thought Keith Richards was a good guitar player.
I think what's good. I think you're right, Sam. I think what impressed me about Keith Richards is that he manages to do some interesting stuff in the songs, but still what you come away remembering are the riffs. And I think that's to get a hook while doing interesting things is a skill. No, I think it's great.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Actually, it's the fact that it was his musicianship that wrote all these fucking songs, all the music the Stones are famous for. He wrote all the music, vast majority of music, and all the riffs. Even though most of them do go da-na-na at some point. It's stuff like Wild Horses. The guitar parts are just beautiful. I know he's influenced by Van Parsons and all that sort of stuff.
Mick told him to go away because he wasn't getting any work done.
Yeah. Also, I'm sort of forgetting that Mick Taylor, after Brian Mick Taylor was often Mick Taylor does a lot of amazing magical stuff that Keith often gets some of the credit for. So, anything else before? Should we do some summings up? And anything else we might want to say, Ross? What are your final thoughts on this? Should we do summings up and scores? What time is it? Yeah, let's just up and scores.
A couple of things. I mean, the one thing that always puts me off on an album is when people record themselves being stoned or drunk and think it's great. Because then when you're not, there's nothing worse than being in a room with someone who's stoned or drunk. And like the whole thing of someone snoring and where's the joint, and I found that tiresome. And I don't think it ever. Actually, that's not true. There's an album by Dr. Hook. It's the only good Dr. Hook album, and it's called Bankrupt. And it was when they were bankrupt, and they basically took all the last cash they had, and they just bought as many drugs as they could, and went to the studio, got stoned, and recorded an album. And it's the best thing they did. It's a great album. That, for some reason,
fairly low bar though, Ross, isn't there? Do you want to say?
Yeah, but it is that is a yes. So it can work.
Bankrupt.
Yeah, Bankrupt. Oh, it's a fantastic album. From family friendly, Dr. Hook. But normally that's one thing my heart always sinks when it's like, all right, it's like the Happy Mondays album we did when on the very last track when he's ringing up people on the phone. It's like you probably thought this was funny, Anyway,
yeah.
I think that it's noticeable that I heard someone mention earlier, not on this, on a podcast I was listening to, that if you went to see the Rolling Stones and they didn't play anything after 1975, you wouldn't feel like you've been cheated, and I think in some ways, if this album didn't exist, I think you look back at the history of Rolling Stones and nothing would have changed really, and the fact you moved from Between the Buttons to Beggar's Banquet, and it's sort of, so I see this is a sort of misstep with some interesting, with a couple of good things. So I didn't hate it, but I found bits of it annoying, and with some little bright sparks in between. Are we doing scores, by the way? I forgot. Sorry, where are we? Yeah, we were doing scores.
Why not? You have a waffle and a score. I think we're doing.
Okay, waffle and score. That's the waffle. I think on the score I would give it 40.
40. I love, but you always big round numbers from you, Ross.
Yes, well,
Good. Loving your work, mate. Steve Hackett, a waffle and a score.
I really, really like it. Actually, I hate the last track. The rest of it, I like it. It's a good album. 75.
Oh, little waffle, big score. Steenie, give us a waffle, mate.
Waffle. Like I said, I think it's it's sadly overlooked. I think it deserves better than just the sort of perfunctory, they were just ripping off the Beatles. They were ripping off some other things. They were channeling something that may not have been entirely authentic, but at the same time, because it's them doing it, it becomes authentic because it just sounds like the Rolling Stones, even when they're trying to be maybe something that they're not really. They weren't really Delta bluesmen, but they managed to make fairly convincing blues and country records over the years. So why not have a stab at something that's quintessentially English, really, in psychedelia? So
it's the last album they made where they weren't trying to be American.
Yeah,
the last album
that is a good point. Actually, it is. Yeah, there's nods on here to blues. I suppose the riff in The Lantern. There's that, but that's kind of bluesy.
Mike Bloomfield in The Lantern.
Yeah.
And this is the last time. Mick Jagger always had that awful American accent after this, didn't he, as well?
Yeah, he's singing
American.
What's funny is on that last song where he's trying to do a sort of posh, well-to-do man voice. He actually struggles to keep that up, despite being quite a posh, well-to-do man.
What's funny about that song? I thought that as well. What's about that song? You get all the Jagger accents in that song over that period. Do you know what I mean?
I heard a story about him going around a room. I think it's a Nick Kent story. He goes around a room and whoever he talks to, he assumes their accent. So he went from being like an American to being a Frenchman in the space of like one backstage party, because he just sort of morphs into whoever he thinks the people speaking to him want him to be.
He's a bit of a twat, isn't he?
I think that's why he hasn't written an autobiography, because I think he can't pin himself down. It's like I can't.
Yeah.
Who am I talking to? Who am I pitching this to? I don't think he can do it. Yeah. He's so insincere.
Yeah, so it's funny. Like Peter Sellers had that sort of massive identity crisis, didn't he? Because he didn't think he had a personality because he'd played so many characters in his life that he was like, "Who is the real Peter Sellers?" But yeah, to get back to this record, I think it's got quite a lot to recommend it. And I will give it a fitting 67 because it came out in 67.
Good.
And I think that's where it kind of sits. It's not magical, but it's got magical moments.
Very good, very succinct, very good, Stevie. Steve Gibson, waffle and a score, please, mate.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed the process, so thank you, Ross. But yeah, I don't think this sort of it didn't stand up then. It was noticeably, the quality dived in my deep dive into 67 when I put this on. It just sounds twee, and they were trying to do something, I guess, that they thought they should do, and they didn't do it very well. Like they don't do anything else very well, in my opinion. That said, I've just obviously listened to it since. I think there's a couple of, I said 2000, whatever it is, and a couple of other flashes of things that are right. I wasn't sitting there hating it. So I'm gonna give it 30 out of 100.
30. Steve, have you heard the Kiss version of 2000 Man?
Me? No, I haven't. No.
Has anyone else heard the Kiss version?
I've heard it. Of course.
Of course, yeah. Which version do you prefer, Steve?
I prefer the Rolling Stones version of 2000 Man.
Yeah, well.
And that's the song that actually reminds me most of the Kinks. There's something Death of a Clown about that melody.
What Kiss album is the cover on?
Dynasty.
The disco album.
Yeah, the one with I Was Made for Loving You on.
Oh, that probably, yeah. I thought most I haven't heard that one then, because that's
yeah.
What a period that was for Kiss.
That was their kind of desperate. All the kids, all the rock fans had abandoned them because they'd all bought lunchboxes and toys and dolls and comics and stuff. So like, shit, what should we do? Let's do disco. Anyway, that's for another day.
Always ends up with Kiss, doesn't it? Always ends up.
Yeah.
Well, it's bloody Hunter running the show. That's the problem.
It's not my fault. It's not my fault. Kiss covered one of these songs. I was asking.
You actually have to bring it up.
I did have to bring
decency,
it up.
Man.
Anyway, yeah. So my waffle. I think I've waffled enough. I thought it was to me. I've probably scored this a bit too highly just because I was so delighted with how coherent it was as an album. I thought it's not coherent. I thought how charmingly ramshackle it was, but also it had moments of brilliance. I thought the mono version hangs together so much better. The playfulness of it, all the kind of instrumentation, Brian Jones being there, them just being a studio without manager for a year, and then having to shit, we've got to release it. As an event, as a cultural event, it's fun, and it's them before they're American, before they became super. I'm just repeating myself now, but I thought it was, I thought it was fantastic, and I'm going to mark it 73. So I've got my calculator here, and so we've got Ross 40 plus Steve Hackett 75 plus Steenie 67 plus Steve Gibson's 30 plus my 73 equals Marcus did this in his head last time. Do you remember?
Did he?
While I was doing it, divided by 5 equals 57. Can that be that feels? Yeah, that's about right, isn't it? 57. So that gives us 57 out of 100. So 57, if I've done that right, puts this in. Okay, so I'll just go down from the top. Thunderbox was 72 by Humble Pie.
Can I just butt in for 2 seconds?
Yes, please do.
When was it Mo Johnson who was signed for Rangers, and there were such passionate fans, they didn't count the goals he scored because he was an ex-Celtic player, and by that token, I'm not counting Thunderbox anymore as number one. Whatever that's got in my brain, if anyone wants to join me, they feel very free. But I don't count Thunderbox as number one now because it's.
Does that make Yes Please number one?
Yeah, I was going to say, Steve, you're not going to be delighted.
Well, it doesn't matter. You know, I just don't think it's better. Thunderbox is number one because it was a misunderstood concept.
You're justifying your argument by using a bit of like sectarian hatred there.
Well,
I love it. I love it. Just at the end of the pod, it comes out. There's a complete rule change that the number one that's always been the number one is not allowed to be the number one.
No, I don't count as number one. So yes, please.
In that case, when I do this rundown, I'll always have to say, well, the number one, although it's not officially the number one, you know what I mean? It's going to be one of those awful things like Prince and the artist used to be. Anyway,
and your money, mate.
All right, well, number one, anyway, well, bear this in mind moving forward. We'll put it on the WhatsApp.
Pin it somewhere.
So, right, currently, Thunderbox number one, 72. Yes, Please is number two, 66. Drama by Yes is number 3 with 61. Then this is number 4, or if we take away Thunderbox, number 3. So this is with the current iteration. This comes in at number 4. So this is very high with 57. So yeah, it just above Van Halen 3 and God Hates Us All by Slayer. So there we go. Very good, Ross. Fantastic, mate.
Yeah,
I've got this one. I think we've all enjoyed this.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed listening to, as we always do. We always listen to the albums before, the albums after, and it sends you off on a kind of like. I know we say this every time, but what's great about this podcast is that you know the way we all listen to music in such a fragmented bit of this, bit of this, bit of this, bit of this, bit of everything. What this does is how we used to listen to music. Right, you used to put an album on and listen to it a lot and find out whether you liked it or not.
Yeah.
And this is and this very strange criteria we have for doing it. It's good fun. Okay, Steenie, it's your turn next, mate.
Yes.
What are you lumping us with, mate?
Well,
Bankrupt by Dr. Hook.
No,
Gotta be.
That reference to Dr. Hook just reminded me though of Bob Mortimer's joke that I heard the other week where he's on about in the 70s I went to see Dr. Hook. It's the worst prostate exam I've ever had. But anyway, so to I hate to be a cliche and to fall back on my heavy metal roots, which I thought I successfully avoided last time with that Chris Cornell record, but I'm going to have to go this time for probably one of my favorite bands, Black Sabbath, and one of their many derided albums, The Eternal Idol, from the mid-80s.
Is that Tony Martin?
Tony Martin on vocals, I think, is it? It's an album. This is a thing that I've never properly listened to, which is totally unusual for a Sabbath album because I was going to choose Seventh Star, but I actually really like that record, even though most people don't even consider it a real Sabbath album. So I think Eternal Idol. Is it Tony Martin or is it Ray Gillan from Badlands?
I don't know. You know what? I know he had. I don't know that period at all.
I say they're one of my favorite bands, and I don't even know the answer to that question. I've got a suspicion it might be Ray Gillan, but anyway, that would be my choice. The Eternal Idol by Black Sabbath.
Did Ray Gillan die?
He did die. Yeah, he did.
Badlands, right?
Badlands with J.K. Lee, ex Aussie. But
anyone know this album, Ross? Steve Hackett? Do you?
Never heard of it.
You know my in-depth knowledge of metal, Seb.
Yeah, but also Ross, I'm also aware of the profundity of your research, mate. You know that your alien research was.
What was the cover for this, Steenie? What was?
Isn't it a Rodin sculpture or something? It's like a man.
Oh yeah, I do. I know that. Yeah, I know.
Sculpture.
Yeah. I heard the album when it came out. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, no one liked it.
Yeah.
And on the strength of other people's opinions, I, as a supposed Black Sabbath fan, have never listened to it.
Right.
So it shows what a fair weather fan I am.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah,
that's the
smell
one.
the glove.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting there. You're getting close to it.
Yeah, I think he's smelling something else.
The rib. Smell the rib.
Anyway.
So
didn't they recently release a box set of all this stuff?
Yeah.
We didn't have to do the box set, did we, Steve?
No.
Just the original.
Well,
the original 9 songs.
What's Metallica releasing that Load box set where there's like about 5 albums worth of stuff as if it wasn't long enough already.
It's
So
like 300 tracks or something, isn't it?
yeah, something bonkers, as if you need to any of that again.
Really weird. Really, really weird.
Do any of you actually listen? I was looking at that new thing with like Dylan and the band, and how many 30 odd concerts or something.
Yeah,
About 5 days of music.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone sits down and listens to any of these big long
Be
things.
surprised.
Them sort of, I think it just appeals to collectors, really, isn't it? It's just if you're a collector sort of person.
Nuts, isn't it?
I tried with a Funhouse box set where it had like, I don't even remember how many versions of TVI on it. Like, well,
I got that as well.
Yeah,
that's a lot of money now.
Yeah, there's only one version of TVI that you really need to hear, and that's the one on the record.
It's interesting once, isn't it? That it's like the Pet Sound Session, same thing.
Yeah.
I normally end up thinking, I can see why they ended up with the album that they did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they did recently Space Ritual, with about 8 gigs. I think the album was taken from about 3 different gigs, and the guy tried to review it, and you're trying to review 10 different versions of Born to Go. They all sound the fucking same. It's one of those songs. It's not going to vary. That's the whole point of it. But I bought it anyway.
Fantastic. Right, on that note, I think we can end it. Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thank you, Steve. Great choice, man. Yeah, and thank you, Ross, for that. That was really fun. So thank you, Steve Gibson. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve Hackett. Thank you, Steenie.
Yeah,
Cheers, Ross.
Thank you very much.
My name is Seb Hunter, and thanks for listening and watching. And please subscribe, all that sort of stuff. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everyone. Bye.